Welcome back to Books in Review. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with us for this series is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
We're doing part 5 of the pre-release version of the Anti-Christian Conspiracy, and it's more predictions from the past for the future from Msgr Delassus, Your Excellency.
Very prophetic when you think that it was written around 1900 or so.
And one of the things that he starts with in this volume is talking about the character of the people who are part of the anti-Christian conspiracy. The revolutionary is a consecrated man. He has no personal interests, no feelings, no business interests, no preferences, no goods, even no name. All in him is absorbed by a single and exclusive interest, a single thought, a single passion, the revolution. Not only through his words, not only through his actions, but also in the very depth of his being, he is forever divorced from public order, from the entire civilized world. Cold towards himself, he must also be towards others. All his feelings of affection, love, or gratitude must be stifled in his soul by the unique and calm passion of revolutionary work. Day and night he must have a single thought, pursue a single goal, relentless destruction. While performing this work coldly and relentlessly, he must be ready to die and slaughter with his own hands anyone who opposes his designs.
Yeah, that about says it. Yeah, you'd have to, in order to bring about what they have brought about, you would have to have people who were dedicated in that way, yes.
How is it possible to be animated by something so abstract as this idea of revolution, Your Excellency, that's driving them?
The devil. This is ultimately inspired by the devil. The devil wants to, if he can't crucify Christ or keep him crucified, let's say, I mean, he was successful in crucifying him, but if he can't keep him down, so to speak, by the resurrection, he's got to go after his church. And so the church is the archenemy of the devil, and the devil inspires these things. And ultimately, now you have the spirit of the age, you might say, where certain ideas are generated by previous ideas. All of the subjectivism, for example, of the 18th century and the 19th century was inspired by the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation. And the Protestant Reformation was inspired by all of the humanism of the Renaissance. So, there's a succession of evil ideas. But the object of hatred is the Catholic Church because it represents Christ the King. It is an all-embracing religion, and it is something that is offensive to people who are pagans and who want to see a pagan hedonistic society.
Here, Msgr Delassus goes a bit further in a footnote. Freemasonry is, through its very constitution, not merely an entity that dissimulates what it does and pursues. It has further built an immense machine, assembled to constantly spread all kinds of lies throughout the entire world. This machine is made of the major Jewish press agencies and the newspapers which spread everywhere the news they received from them. The first report of events always reaches readers around the world in such a way as to deceive them and foster prejudices against the truth, against what is just and legitimate, against what is good. It is inside the ghettos and the back lodges that this manipulation is crafted, and the news thus distorted is imposed even to the openly Catholic newspapers because of the monopoly of Jewry. They manipulate reputations as they manipulate the news. Through the press, Freemasonry exalts men that are the least worthy of esteem in every possible way. Leon Gambetta is one of the best examples of the worldwide reputation that the sect can create for its members. His name is inscribed in the streets, in the squares of all our cities, as little as they may be. His effigy is everywhere. For most people, he is a great patriot, great politician, great speaker, savior of the homeland, father of democracy. Needless to say what he was in reality, our readers are knowledgeable enough about contemporary history not to ignore it. Non-French people might not be familiar with Leon Gambetta.
Yeah, he was the president of France, perhaps the first, if not the first, very close to the first president of France of the Third Republic. I have to get a little French history. After the fall of the empire under Napoleon III, in 1871, there was a period of about 5 or 6 years of interim government, and actually it was led by a Catholic general, MacMahon, which is really McMahon, and but he was of Irish origin, but he was French, and he was a pious Catholic. That's when they started the construction of the Basilica of Sacré-Cœur. There was a Catholic resurgence during the 1870s because of the shock of the Franco-Prussian War. And but then Gambetta, he was a Jewish Freemason, and he headed up France, I would say about from 1880 to 1885, around there, in that area. And yes, he introduced the Third Republic was destroyed the Catholic faith in France. That's the only way you could put it. They shut down the religious orders. They shut down the Catholic schools. They took over all of the education, and they are responsible for what France is today, that Third Republic. Yes, so his comments are very well taken.
And we see that today as well. And you preached about this last Sunday, was the last 24th and last Sunday after Pentecost. And you talked about righting the wrongs, that people's reputations who had a good reputation, but it really turns out they were bad, this will be revealed at the general judgment, and vice versa. People who seem to have bad reputations will have revealed the truth about them. And that in this world, we see the press at work lionizing people who are really deeply corrupt.
Correct.
And
vice versa.
Right.
Yes. No, it's every ounce, every tiny grain of justice will be done by God. There will not be a single injustice undone when the second coming comes. Yes.
Those who hunger and thirst for justice will have their fill at the general judgment.
They will. Yes, they will.
Expanding on this point, Msgr. Delassus writes, first, and as a foundation for the doctrine that will be built upon this basis, two key suggestions. One, Masonry is a sublime institution, the eternal initiator of all that is good and great in humanity. And two, this association has one enemy, Catholicism. At first they say clericalism, hence the conclusion, since Catholicism is the enemy of Masonry, it is the enemy of all the great causes to which Masonry devotes itself. Therefore, whoever loves these great causes must fight itself against Catholicism. How can Freemasonry be presented in such a beautiful light, and Catholicism in such a deplorable way? By making Freemasonry the organ and defender of reason. It's reasonable to be opposed to the darkness and obscurantism of the clerics, Your Excellency.
Yes, Freemasonry, it was born in London in 1715, I believe, right around there. It was riding the crest of the wave of naturalism, which was very much brewing in England. And that is that human beings do not need grace. They don't need revelation. They don't need a redeemer. Human beings are good in themselves, and they can govern themselves very nicely just by reason. So it was this turn toward rationalism, reason. Now, there's nothing wrong with reason. It's just that human beings fall flat on their faces when it comes to, for example, religious questions based only on reason. I mean, if you look at the history of human religions, it's absurd, actually. But also because of original sin, human beings are prone to error. So reason alone is not something that will save the planet. But that was the idea that we don't need religion. We just need reason. That was very much in the 18th century, was loaded with that idea. And that's what brought on the French Revolution, the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and all of the 19th century revolutions.
And as you're pointing to, Your Excellency, it's a replacement for God. Who is this goddess to whom Freemasonry offered so many human sacrifices on the day that it made her be worshipped in the person of a prostitute? Mm-hmm. We know individual reason, human intelligence in which study and reflection, experience, science, and wisdom are more or less developed with age. But individual reason is always limited, even among the most learned and the most wise. Reason thus acquired through study and experience is nothing more than a reflection, inside the human soul, of the infinite reason which is God. Is it God and his infinite wisdom that the Freemasons want to defend against Catholicism under the name of reason? The question answers itself. The reason they want us to adore is only a ghost they dress up with shining words: science, progress, civilization, liberty, and to which they devote all their followers. Under these words are hidden opposition against Christian truths, an opposition to civilization based upon the principles introduced in the world by the preachings of Christ.
Yes, it is what we call organized naturalism. The Catholic Church is organized supernaturalism, so they are absolutely opposed, two things diametrically opposed. And yes, they have this idea of the prosperity and good order of the world, all based on those things that he mentions. And it's a formula that is just condemned to failure. And we see the state of the world today based on reason, quote unquote, and it's an absolute mess, frankly.
And we can see the scare words they use: science, progress, civilization, liberty. They can always say, "Are you against science?
Yes.
Are you opposed to progress, Your Excellency?"
Yes. It's no, it's very carefully formulated. Yeah, you can see the influence of the devil in there.
Today, the suggestions of humanitarianism and abolition of borders, whether political or dogmatic, hold the first place. Their goal is to destroy all attachment to the homeland and to religion, so that upon these ruins might be founded the Jerusalem of the new order, which should be extended to the whole universe.
Well, this sounds like Leo. Yes, humanitarianism, get rid of the borders of dogma. You see, he's getting rid of the filioque, I think, is going to. We should not, he said, be concerned about outmoded theological disputes.
Arguments, disputes.
Yes, but you can see his agenda is to get rid of the theological and dogmatic borders of the Catholic Church, and all he talks about is humanitarianism. I mean, the two things that are on his brain are climate change and peace in the world and immigration. Now, this is 1900, around there, talking about these very things: humanitarianism, immigration. Now, there was open borders. I mean, this is.
I mean, who was thinking about open borders in the 1900s in France?
No, there were many borders there, and the and the United States had borders. You had Ellis Island. That was quite a border to get through, and many people were turned back. It's just normal. You can't have a country without borders.
Can't have a religion without borders either,
Right.
Your Excellency.
You can the same thing. So you can see that this has deep roots. This revolt against the Catholic Church and against everything that's decent has very deep roots.
And Monsignor Delassus is, as he's arguing to the French, he didn't know that he'd be arguing to an American audience in translation.
Right.
That these two things are tied together: the health of your state and the health of your religion. They're tied together in this concept of borders. At first sight, one might be tempted to think that a nation can only be defeated through military means. This is an error. Alongside wounds that cause blood to flow from the veins, there are wounds that are more debilitating and more difficult to heal, which cause blood to flow from the soul. Where is the soul of a people? In its traditions. It is in its origins and the traditions that flow from them that a nation finds the true sources of its life. Whoever examines the facts of our contemporary history can see that an immense and relentless effort has been underway for 160 years to kill the French soul by this means, detaching it from its origins and traditions, making it forget them, and inspiring hatred and contempt for them.
Yes, you do. You suck out the soul of the country by doing all of those things, and and also I'd point out that unfortunately, the first country in the history of the world which did not profess a religion was the United States. In the history of the world, I mean, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, they all had religion. It was an integral part. You couldn't think of a state without religion. But that's again, all of that was based on reason. You see, Thomas Jefferson, he was loaded with all of the ideas of the English 18th century, loaded. So he wanted a complete separation, a wall of separation, he said, between church and state. and then that the French Revolution was even more in that direction. It was yet more of a shock because France had such deep roots in union of church and state from the time of Clovis, which is 5th century, and it had always been a nation that professed the Catholic faith. And the French Revolution, more than anything else, revolted against this establishment of the Catholic faith in France. If they had wanted to go through simply a change of government, it would have been a much smoother thing. As a matter of fact, Louis XVI was open to a type of government the way England had a parliament and a king. He was open to that. So he was, and he went along with the Constitution, etc. But what he would not go along with was the destruction of the Catholic faith in his country, and that's why you had all of that bloodshed and horror and terror, because you're revolting against something which is intrinsic to the country. You see, and form of government can come and go, but that's intrinsic to the country, and that's what he means by its traditions. The religious traditions are the most important.
Well, and I'm sure Americans are hearing their own story here, Your Excellency. You might be tempted to think a nation can be defeated only through military means. You've seen it much more than I have because you grew up in a different America, a
Absolutely.
substantially different America.
Yes. The things I see, I just shake my head now. I mean, things that would never have passed at all. People would have just been in disbelief.
They've got to lock up the aspirin at CVS.
Right.
In case people steal it.
Yes. No, it's yes, the amount of stealing that goes on, the violence. There were just two soldiers shot near the White House today. I mean, it's just no. You can rot out a country much more efficaciously by poisoning it from the inside. Absolutely, you can.
Is it not singularly impressive, this march of Freemasonry, established in the midst of a people whose eyes it begins by closing, and whose reason it begins by intoxicating? Then it suppresses one after the other the organs of our national life, attacking first those which the occult power feels it is more urgent to destroy, the monarchy, a national political tradition, a strength which maintained cohesion in the social body, which coordinated efforts in view of national defense. Then, Catholicism, a moral strength which gave souls the drive without which even the best organization would remain useless, as would be a machine, even the most sophisticated, in which there would be no steam. With this preliminary destruction accomplished, the soul of the country asleep, if not destroyed, and its members either disunited or paralyzed, reduced to defensive incapacity, the occult power successfully attacks the now defenseless ideas of property, family, and morality, which in the absence of traditional institutions and fundamental principles that have been previously destroyed, would still distinguish man from beast. But it wants this last distinction to be erased, and it insists on it by proclaiming that it works for light, justice, civilization, and progress. It finally attacks the idea of nation itself, in the same way it attacked all the others, that is to say, by discreetly spreading, through fraud and lies, in the lodges and from there to the profane world, the ideas it feels are necessary to fanaticize the ones and numb the others. The occult power has resolved to kill us by the renunciation of all our traditions, by making us the architects of our own ruin.
Very true. Yes.
I think that's something else to think about, Your Excellency, property, family, and morality, that unbelievers don't realize how much of their society is held up by Christianity. Remove Christianity, all those other things fall down too.
Yes, they do. Yes, then you open the door to socialism. You open the door to immorality. How do you have morality without religion? Except reason, quote unquote. But again, reason falls on its face by permitting things that are contrary even to natural law. No, it's just a formula for the destruction of Catholic Europe and whatever is left of Catholic Europe, even in Protestant countries.
As an aside, Your Excellency, this idea of how the French were attached to the king, there's not really an analog for us as Americans in how we would think about the president is not how how much reverence the French had for the king and the role that the monarchy played in French political life.
Yes, he was consecrated in the Cathedral of Reims, which goes back to Clovis. Clovis was baptized. That's why, and that's about 80 miles from Paris. So they had to go in carriages to Reims, and he was anointed, and he was able to sing the gospel at mass, and he sat in the sanctuary with his family. All of those things. That there was a perfect combination or cooperation between church and state, and so the king was, in a way, the embodiment of the whole nation, and it gave that unity. In other words, that we're a natural, just like a father of a family, where there's a natural unity that emanates from him. Whereas when you get into democracy, you look what happens. What's happening in France now. It's just absurd. And France is the fifth republic. I mean, they'll probably get a sixth one soon. France has come down a great deal since the time. Even under Napoleon was a monarch. He was horrible. He was a pro-revolutionist all the way. I mean, Freemasonry, everything. I mean, there's no evidence that he was a Freemason, but he was surrounded by Freemasons that he appointed. Again, France had a lot of, you might say, strength under the monarchy of Napoleon. But as soon as it got a republic, France has not performed very well, in the...
As you say, they're on to the fifth one. It looked like the first four didn't quite
Yes,
cut
I mean,
it.
they lost the Franco-Prussian War. They would have lost the World War I had it not been for the intervention of the Americans. And they lost the Second World War. I mean, they're big movements, you might say, that where they should have performed very well, they did not. And I think it's because they've been weakened by that democratic Masonic idea, all those ideas, and internally weakened by the naturalism and everything that Freemasonry is preaching.
Yeah, and it's often said, Your Excellency, to think about it mystically, that when the head of Louis XVI was separated from the body, that the heart and the head of France were separated.
Mm-hmm.
And so reason is trying to lead, but the heart of France is also, those two things have to be put back together. You can't put together a decapitated body. And that idea of the king being the father of the nation also is more coherent when you have a nationality that matches an ethnicity, where French people know who they are. It's not questioned, and they aren't made to feel guilty about being French.
Right.
And I think perhaps the closest analog, and your Excellency, you can comment here because I wasn't alive. You weren't quite alive, but your father could have told you. The Fireside Chats by FDR was probably the closest idea of, I'm the father of the nation. I'm here to take care of you. People would have pictures of FDR in their house.
Yes, he was worshipped would be too strong of a word, but he was highly venerated. And even though he was a socialist, nonetheless, there was some aura about him that drew people. He was a great orator. He had that voice that was, very impressive. Yes, he everybody thought highly. I mean, even my parents, who were not socialists or anything, oh, Roosevelt, he was wonderful, And it's true. There is a natural tendency to monarchy in people. There's a sort of I would just say a security in monarchy, a continuity, and it gives a nation its identity, you might say, and democracies don't do that.
And needless to say, that era of reverence for the president has passed in our time.
Oh, yes, no, you couldn't. No, you could never criticize Roosevelt on this. No.
As you pointed out in a different conversation, Roosevelt was able to silence Father Coughlin, just by making a phone call.
Yes.
From a political perspective, Freemasons have varied, but at all times Freemasonry has been firm on this principle: war on all superstitions, war on all fanaticism. The triumph of the Galilean has lasted 20 centuries, and it is dying. This song of victory contains a lie. It says war on all superstitions and all fanaticism, yet there is a superstition and a fanaticism that Masonry has never fought against. the Jewish superstition and fanaticism. For Israel, against the Galilean, this is the phrase that best sums up the work of Freemasonry. Well, Monsignor Delassus would be canceled for saying such things these days, Your
I think
Excellency.
so, yes, yes. But I mean, Judaism and Freemasonry, they both have the same, how would you say, enthusiasm or energy to undo the church that Christ founded. So what opposes Judaism to Catholicism is a single thing, and that is Christ as the Son of God. A single thing, true Messiah.
The stumbling block.
It's the one thing, and they resent the Catholic Church because they rejected Christ in the hope of getting a Messiah that would bring them worldly glory instead of supernatural glory. And so they have this almost built-in opposition to Catholicism.
It's long lasting. I think someone had noted Ben Shapiro was at the Arch of Titus making a derogatory gesture. You think, well, it's been a long time since Titus was around, but they hold that grudge against the Romans, which then necessarily gets transferred to the church as well.
Yes, and they just gave trouble. It had nothing to do with Catholicism at the time. They just revolted against the Romans, and that's something you don't do to the Romans.
Well, you find out when you do.
Yeah, yes.
France's core ideals were Catholicism and traditional monarchy. It is from the union of these two ideas and these two facts that the French homeland was born. It owes its development, prosperity, and supremacy over Europe and the whole civilized world to their veneration. Alas, how far it has fallen since a group arose within it, and with so many accomplices outside it, to dry up these two sources of national life in people's souls. And here, Monsignor Delassus, his footnote says, from the 8th to the 15th century, there was only one nation in the world at its peak, France. All the great things it did were born of a dual religious and national inspiration.
It's true. Yes, I mean, it emerged as the great nation of Europe very early. See, and England was still organizing itself and dealing with various invasions, and the German states were not organized. The Italian states were not organized. Spain was mostly Muslim. So yes, it was the original European state. Yes.
These accomplices can even be found in our ranks. When it comes to religious tradition, was it not among Catholics that the encyclical Pascendi had to seek out and condemn the instigators of modernism? And what does modernism do? It attacks in a hypocritical way the very roots of Christianity. Like Protestants, modernists deny the divine authority of the Church. Like rationalists, modernists deny the real divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. Like pantheists and atheists, modernists deny the real existence of a God distinct from the world. Like skeptics, modernists refuse to human reason the power to actually know any kind of truth. And while denying all that, modernists keep all the appearances, all the outward trappings, all the formulas of Catholicism.
Yes. I think of that statement of Leo that we do not possess the truth, but we're all searching for it. That just blows my mind. I mean, to think about the Catholic Church not possessing truth. For this I came into the world to witness unto the truth. For this I was born. See, and we don't possess the truth. None of us possesses the truth. We're all searching for it. That's straight out of that description, you see, and everything else too. But at the same time, parading around on the white, and doing the whole Pope thing, when in fact he's implementing all of those things that are on the agenda of ultimately the forces of Antichrist.
And I would say I sort of get chills, Your Excellency, in his reference to Pascendi, in that he's on the other side of the century. Right. We are, and he's still referencing, here's what modernists do, here's how they cloak themselves, and we're watching what he couldn't. I would say he couldn't have imagined, but it looks like he did imagine it.
Yes, it's almost as if he had a private revelation or something. The accuracy, and they did exactly what he said they would do, and they're still doing it, and people don't wake up. I said to myself the other day, can't I rest my case? I mean, why do we have to prove any more to anyone that these people that are inhabiting the Vatican are not Catholics? one after the other, day after day, there's something that is grossly objectionable to Catholicism.
I know we just recorded Leo watch at URC, and then the Filioque thing comes out a few days later.
Yes,
Just
yes,
we're
yes.
hopelessly outdated.
Outmoded is theological disputes. Oh gosh.
This next image that Monsignor Delassus gives, I feel is very apt, and I think is a great way of unlocking how political energy, even in the natural order, has been dissipated by the Masons. This state of mind is anti-traditional, religious anti-traditionalism, and political anti-traditionalism. It is the result of successive divisions that have taken place in our country over the past 4 centuries. When a quarry worker wishes to break a stone block, he starts by splitting it in 2. Then he attacks successively one and the other part, breaking each one into several pieces as well. He keeps doing that, making smaller and smaller pieces, until they are reduced to the size he wants. This is the process through which France has been reduced to the state in which it is today. His enemy started by breaking it into 2 big pieces. That was when Protestantism was introduced. The Catholic and monarchical French bloc, after having been broken by the establishment of Protestantism, was broken again by the philosophy of the 18th century. The split was even twofold. It happened in a religious sense and in a political sense. The revolution happened as a consequence, and then, instead of the Catholic and monarchical bloc already reduced, there was, on the one hand, Catholics and philosophers, and on the other hand, monarchists and republicans. The empire came as an attempt of reassembly due to the ambition and genius of a man who had to rely upon the conservation instinct of the nation. When this man fell, the task of the restoration was made very hard, for instead of the former national bloc, there were in France Catholics, Protestants, deists, atheists, royalists, imperialists, and republicans. A new division happened when the younger branch succeeded to the older branch. An Orleanist party appeared alongside the numerous other parties. Since then, the mysterious enemy has never ceased to work towards the same goal. He struck relentlessly and silently, working on the fragments produced by the successive explosions of the old French bloc. So much so that now, in France, not only are there Catholics, Protestants, deists, atheists, royalists, imperialists, and republicans, but each of these groups is subdivided in an ever-growing number of subgroups. Look everywhere, on the right and on the left, among believers and non-believers, among patriots and those who are no longer, among authoritarians and liberals. In all circles, in all sides, at all degrees of the social hierarchy, it is a constant war, endlessly renewed under one pretext or another.
Yes, it's very accurate. He's talking about the after the loss of the Franco-Prussian War, what happened to France, and that's when it really started to go downhill. Under the emperor, that's what he's talking about. The empire that's the second empire of Napoleon III in the 1840 to 1870 area, 1850 to 1870 area. There was an upsurge of Catholicism. He had a very pious wife, the Empress Eugenie, and she was Spanish, and so there was a resurgence of Catholicism in France. But then, after the loss of the war, France just, from the political and point of view, just fell apart. And yes, there was a movement to restore the monarchy. There were 3 claimants. One was the rightful heir of the Bourbon rightful heir. One was the Napoleonic rightful heir, and then there was the House of Orleans, which would have been the rightful heir of Louis.
The regicide heir.
Yes, the regicide heir. So that house always detested the Bourbons and wanted to pull them down. So anyway, but France fell into a chaos, and then it emerged with the Third Republic. And he's talking about all that was really the end of any kind of hope of recovery in France.
Might we not have also observed these block divisions in the United States? Actually, I'm thinking there was a time in which birth control was widely detested in the country. Divorce
was illegal.
Divorce was not accepted. No one wondered about how many genders there were. Right.
Yes.
And is it wrong to say that perhaps abortion was that first division? that we had this giant break between people on the right and the left. Everyone accepted, birth control was wrong, killing babies was wrong, and then at some point there was a division, and there was a part of our country that decided killing babies was fine.
I don't know. I think it gradually happened in the 60s. I mean, I remember, I think all hell broke loose in 1960. I lived through that. The 60s were a time of all sorts of revolution in every respect, something with, and change in attitudes. And so various things fell apart during the 1960s. But even in the late, one was birth control. The pill came out in the 1960s, and that was the liberation of the woman, you might say, as the pill, because it used to be by other means that the birth control was practiced, but the pill came out, and so that was, yes, because that's obviously against nature. It is a repudiation of the natural law, and so that started it. Then, well, if you have control over whether you're going to have a baby or not, the next logical thing is that if you conceive, you should be able to kill it. See, because the whole thing is under your control, not under God's control, but under your control. So, yes, logically, you should be able to have an abortion, you see. So it just snowballed, in my opinion. Then there was feminism that came in the
Should be allowed to have a job and a career.
Yes, and keeping the woman at home is like a prison and all of this. And that came in the 1960s. I remember that. And a lot of leftism in the colleges and things that just didn't exist before, or at least not openly. So so I think the 1960s, I would say that is really the turning point. Between 1960 and 1970, you have really a different country.
I think what Msgr Delassus is tracing in France over decades happened, I think, in one decade.
Yes.
Is what you're saying, Your Excellency.
Yes. And what is the cause of that? I mean, things don't just happen by themselves. 1959 was a very calm year in the sense that, nothing terrible was happening. It was all, life was quite normal, you might say, and everybody was in his or her proper role. And, I remember it, it was, but then it all blew up, and then Vatican II with it. So I think that was perhaps the biggest single factor in all of that we have to embrace the modern world, and the modern world is just full of rot. It's full of the stuff that he's describing. And this is as a matter of fact, I just read a quote from Ratzinger when he was a theologian, or whatever you want to call that, that the purpose of Vatican II is to incorporate some of the ideas of 1789, and that we have to speak to this, yes, I just saw that the other day.
It's horrifying.
So it's that idea is that we have to embrace modernism. We have to embrace this revolt that is organized by these Freemasons and other enemies of the Catholic Church, and somehow relate to it. That's what we have today. That's why the faith has just fallen apart, except for little pockets of Catholics who still believe.
In order to be profound, long-lasting, and universal, the propaganda of ideas must take place from an early age in education. In his instructions to the regent, Weishaupt said, "We must win over the common people to our order. The best way to do this is through our influence on schools. You must constantly seek ways in which public education, ecclesiastical government, and teaching or preaching offices can be taken over in your provinces. Crush the enemy, whoever he is," said the instructions to the members of the Alta Vendita. "But above all, nip it in the bud. It is to the youth that we must go. It is the youth that we must seduce, that we must train them without noticing. Go to the youth, and if that is possible, even to the little children." I shudder to read that line, Your Excellency, knowing what our Lord's condemnation is for those people.
Well, they don't care. No, that's exactly, that happened in the 60s too. I remember you could send your kid to public school in the 1950s. And not to say that, they were ideal or anything. It's just that you would not get that indoctrination that they're talking about there. It was just you learning how to read and write and arithmetic and all those things. But then the 60s, all of that education business came in. And obviously, yes, if you can capture the youth, you capture the whole nation. And I think, don't forget, people who were living or children in the 60s are now my age or a little younger than I am. See, so the Leo is from 1955, so he was, 5 years old in 1960. So he would have known all of that, at least as a child, all of those years of change, etc. So that's what we're seeing. They have come to maturity, and they are altering the world that we live in.
Yeah, the boomer window, I think, is the mid 40s to the mid 60s, Your Excellency. So, as you say, the earliest boomers would have been coming of age in that time, and even the youngest boomers would have been growing up in this new world that the 60s produced. Freemasonry has succeeded in getting the public to adopt the term secularization, laicization, instead of de-Christianization, secularization instead of divorce between the religious and civil orders, in the family and in society, neutrality in schools instead of atheistic teaching, separation of church and state instead of atheism in government and laws, denunciation of the concordat instead of spoliation of the church, disaffectation instead of confiscation, current laws instead of arbitrary and illegal decrees, tolerance instead of license given to the worst errors, etc. It turned words such as clericalism and mortement into bogeymen, and words such as liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy into seductions.
Yes.
All of these words now, Your Excellency, have been so softened that we don't realize that secularization, as he alludes to, means state atheism. That's what it really means, but secularism sounds nice and soft and neutral.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, this country has been infected with state atheism since 1789. And less, and I say that more on the level of states than the federal government, because again, the federal government was saying we're not going to interfere with your state religions. So when the states, however, adopted freedom of religion and we're not going to, separation of church and state, that's really when this country apostatized. Yes, and we're feeling the effects of it now, because how do you do morality without religion? It's impossible.
You've said that many times.
Yes, the judges on the Supreme Court, they're going to decide whether a baby can live or not.
By what authority?
Yes.
Here is the actual meaning of words such as liberty, equality, progress, modern thinking, science, etc., which recur constantly in the speeches and articles of politicians and in the manifestos of candidates sponsored by the lodges. It is revolution, the destruction of social order, a return to the state of nature through the annihilation of all authority as a limitation on freedom, the destruction of all hierarchy as a violation of equality, and the establishment through fraternity of a new order in which all rights and all property will be shared. When the initiates utter these words, they know that they are setting out an entire program against the laws of God and his representatives on earth. They are expressing the concept of the social state as formulated by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The others, by foolishly repeating these words, prepare those whom Freemasonry could not directly reach to accept this social state. You will own nothing and you will be happy, Your Excellency, as the World Economic Forum tells us.
Socialism. That's what we're talking about, socialism. Yeah, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a debauched nut. That's the only way to.
And that's putting it kindly, I think, Your Excellency.
That's about the softest I could go. And an idiot. He was also an idiot. But he copied most of what he wrote. He just made it more popular. And he was very well read at the time. And yes, he is responsible for the political systems that are prevalent today.
You might be able to unpack this a bit more for people who don't understand the import of this, Your Excellency. A pamphlet on human rights written in German, English, or Italian would only amuse some servants in the countryside. But written in French, it will stir up all the forces of the universe in the blink of an eye.
Well, it's true that France has always had a tremendous cultural influence. In Europe, it has had it, and even here, it has been the sort of the place where ideas germinate and are come to maturity. it has always had that place in the world of a sort of special civilization, you might say, something. And so, yes, it has been a tremendous influence. I mean, it influenced this country by all of its writings. The all of the revolutionists of this country were influenced by France, and the French Freemasons saw this as sort of a dry run of their own revolution, and that's why they came over and helped Freemason Washington. Yes, in Europe especially, France was always considered to be I would just say, the intellectual guide to what we should be thinking and doing, and culturally too. It's true. It's just historically true.
All these deceptive expressions have been created over the past 2 centuries. Under the reign of philosophism, it was tolerance and superstition that passed from mouth to mouth. Under the reign of terror, it was fanaticism and reason. Under the Restoration, Ancien Regime, tithe, privileges. Under the Second Empire, progress. During the recent persecution in Germany, the Kulturkampf. In France, during May 16th, the government of priests. Today, the most fashionable words are clericalism, science, democracy, and solidarity. Science against the faith. Democracy against all religious, social, and family hierarchies. Solidarity among the plebeians against all those who stand in the way of the free enjoyment of the goods of this world, the rich who possess them, and the priests who forbid the unjust desire for these goods. Solidarity also among all peoples who, from one end of the world to the other, must help each other to break the triple yoke of property, authority, and religion.
Yes, that's world socialism. I think we're well on our way to that with the help of Leo.
Substituted, liberty, equality, fraternity, these 3 words, arranged in this order, indicate what a well-ordered society should be. What it will be when the social contract has reached its final conclusion and borne its final fruits. Weishaupt and his followers have openly stated what they claim to derive from this expression. First, the abolition of religion and all civil authority, then the abolition of all social hierarchy and all property.
Yeah, that's yes. All social hierarchy. There's always a social hierarchy, even though there's no hierarchy. There is always some who will rise to the top and others who will fall down to the bottom. That's just true in every society, because people are not equal except in the fact that they all have human nature, but they are really not equal in anything else.
It's even true in nature. You can see some horses are faster than others, some trees are taller than others.
Yes. Some plants are better than others, and you'd rather have roses in your garden than weeds, and it's the stamp of God really on all nature, that there is a variety and there's a hierarchy. No, to deny hierarchy is absurd, and even the most socialist countries always had a hierarchy. The Communist Party in Russia was definitely a hierarchy, and was very monarchical too, and the chairman of the Communist Party was it.
And if you were a central committee member and your family, you were part of, you got the good stuff, and everyone else.
They were filthy rich. Yes, and everybody else, they were living in these state apartments, and all. It was horrible.
Sharing those too.
Oh, yes.
We have returned to the confusion of Babel. All ideas are muddled, and in this muddle, many Christians are most easily led astray by Masonic errors. They do not distrust these ideas, but rather abandon themselves to their waves with tranquility. And this because most of the words they use can be used to express Christian ideas, just as they lend themselves to expressing ideas that are most opposed to the spirit of Christianity. Among the words in vogue today, there is none that is used more frequently and more perniciously than liberty. It has 2 sides, both Christian and Masonic. Pope Leo XIII said that liberty is the highest of natural endowments, being the portion only of intellectual or rational natures. Intelligence gives them knowledge of their ends. Reason enables them to discover the means to achieve them, and free will allows them to choose those means that suit them and to use them to attain the ends they set themselves. If all men saw and placed their last end where it actually lies, while demanding liberty, all would ask that the way to the sovereign place be wide open, unobstructed by any stumbling blocks, and that they themselves be unhindered in their ascent to God. But who does not know that the ends to which men aspire are innumerable, as diverse as the objects of their passions? Because of that, a call to liberty can spring from the hearts of both the greatest saints and the greatest villains. While they seem to ask for the same thing together, and seem to desire one same thing, they actually desire things as diverse and even as opposed as the infinite degrees that lead man to the highest virtue, on the one hand, and no less numerous degrees that lead him down to the worst corruption on the other.
Yes, the liberty in the common parlance of revolutionaries and of the 18th century and 19th century too, is throwing off the yoke of Christ the King. Ultimately, that throwing off the moral law, total subjectivism as to what you think is right and wrong, and where nobody's going to tell you what to do. That's the cult of liberty that you see in the 18th century and 19th century and even now. That's why you have a Statue of Liberty that was conceived by a Freemason, paid for by Freemasons in France, made by a Freemason, and then shipped over here, and was the pedestal was paid for by a Freemason, and Freemasons went out and anointed it.
There's a Masonic witch in the harbor.
Yes, I call her the Masonic witch. Yes, and she's walking on chains. She's holding July 4th, 1776, which, is symbolic as, again, I mean, I don't want to get into that, but the
This is a Madonna image for the revolution.
It is. It's the Madonna of the revolution. She's the mother of all of these sick ideas. And that's I have although I have a picture. My father took me to see the Statue of Liberty in 1957. I have a picture of it standing next to my father with the statue in the back. But at the time, you don't know those things. It's just a nice big statue.
Sure.
Isn't that nice? And so I don't think I'll put that in the newsletter.
It would be an in-demand picture, though,
yes,
for sure.
Yes.
This idea.
I was 7 years old.
This idea of the state, he says, Msgr Delassus said, if people were to demand liberty and ask that the way to the sovereign place be wide open, unobstructed by stumbling blocks, that your place in society would be to pursue heaven. I heard a young Frenchman once say, in trying to construct this, he said, it should be illegal to go to hell. This idea that the state should encourage everyone to go to heaven and should clear the way for the pursuit of eternal life, that is really what happens when the state and church are aligned, that in a sense it's illegal to go to hell. Things are preventing you from seeking vice. The way is clear to pursue virtue.
See, and the modern notion of liberty is that law is an enemy of liberty, and law is not the enemy of liberty, because the purpose of liberty is to elect the good, to elect the means toward the good. So if you want to drive someplace, you elect to take a certain road, you see, and there might be many roads, but you elect that you're free. But the end is always the good, you see, and the law points out the good. So there's no conflict there. But liberty in the modern sense means that we make the laws, and any kind of civil law or anything that binds us is considered to be a necessary evil, so that we don't kill each other or we don't steal from each other. See, it's considered a necessary evil. But people should, just like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the ideal of man was to be running naked in the forest, and then society happened. See, and so this is something we're bogged down with, but we're actually, free as the wind blows, as the song is from the 60s, born free, free as the wind blows. Yes.
Well, as going back to the comments from the beginning of this episode, Your Excellency, that idea of borders, laws serve as those borders and guardrails for us to pursue liberty, to pursue freedom in its right paths.
Yes. It makes all the sense in the world that you have borders, and that you let people in that you want to, and that you keep out those you don't want. I mean, it's like your house. Otherwise, why not just live out on the lawn and let anybody come?
Well, that's happening these days, right?
Yes.
People get access to 4-star hotels and
Yes,
debit
very nice.
cards.
Yes, yeah.
Sambonnet said, "The most disastrous thing for the people after the revolution itself is the language it created. The most formidable thing after the revolutionaries themselves are the men who use this language, whose words are like seeds of the revolution. Let us no longer throw terms at the crowd without explaining their theological and true meaning to them. They continue to generate ideas that keep the masses in turmoil and tear them away from the duties of life."
Yeah, they're very good at their arts. Yes.
We have heard Freemasonry say in its lodges that the goal to which all its efforts must tend is to destroy religion, and even all religious ideas. In public, it generally confines itself to instilling in people's minds the belief that religion is a purely individual matter, that each person decides for themselves. Man is free to serve and worship God in whatever way he sees fit. In doing so, it accredits and propagates religious indifference, which soon becomes the absence of all religion. It proclaims freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, and the right to discredit religions. Many conservatives allow themselves to be seduced to the point of calling these Masonic concepts a progress.
Yeah, that sounds like Vatican II. Yes. Yes, and here, as you know, if you were to actually talk to average American Catholics, they would say, "Oh, of course, you have the right to believe whatever you want, as
As long as you don't hurt
long
anybody.
as you don't hurt anybody." And that's condemned by the Catholic Church. But that's because of the 19th century clergy in this country, who, despite other virtues that they had, always wanted to be good Americans, and America is religious freedom. Therefore, we're going to wave the American flag for religious freedom. And that's why Americanism was condemned. As one of the things that was condemned in the Tamezzi, which was a condemnation of Americanism by Leo XIII. So, no, there's, and it's true that just eliminates religion. We're seeing now, not only among the Novus Ordo, but also in Protestant religions and churches, whatever you want to call them, they're going way down too, except the ones that are you might say the evangelicals. They're not losing anybody.
Right.
Actually, they're going up. But mainstream is Protestants are going down, and Novus Ordo is just in the tubes, down the tubes. They are.
Leo's leading that charge into the
Yes,
tubes.
right into the tubes. Yes, and I think so. It does, and again, it makes religion disappear from politics and culture. It's a purely private thing. And culture and politics that is stripped of religion is something that is doomed to fail.
And ugly, too.
Yes.
The error relative to the state adopted by Freemasonry is the following. The state is sovereign. It has absolute sovereignty. It finds the source of its authority in itself, not in God. It recognized no other subjection than that imposed by its own laws. It is the author of the law, not only in its own domain, but also in that of the family, property, and education. It makes the laws, and these laws, which thus dispose of all things, cannot emanate from any authority other than its own. Whatever the majority declares to be good is good. What it declares to be true is true. In the face of its rulings, one can only bow one's head, even though the rights of Christian conscience are being violated. This is now accepted by the masses. For them, as soon as the word law is mentioned, nothing can be further debated.
Yes, they see eliminating God as the author of authority in the state. Well, where does it come from? It comes from below. It comes from the masses, and then you have democratic states, and whatever the masses want is correct. That's all Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It's straight out of the book of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Yes, they become infallible, And George Bernard Shaw, he was a socialist and not a very edifying person at all, but he did say something interesting. It was after the definition of infallibility. He said, when you consider the infallibility claimed by modern democracies, it seems that the Pope is on his knees proclaiming his ignorance.
Very, very
it was sarcastic way of saying that what are you complaining about, you democracies? You think that you're infallible too. So that's interesting. But he's not somebody to emulate by any means.
Masonry approves of the institution of civil marriage and everything that results from it. That is to say, it accepts that the state reserves the right to sanction the union of a man and a woman, to determine and prescribe the conditions thereof, and to dissolve the marital bond as it has formed it. It admits that the state replaces God, who instituted marriage at the beginning of time, our Lord Jesus Christ, who elevated it to the dignity of a sacrament, and the Church, the representative of God in Christ, in order to regulate, recognize, and bless it.
Well, it makes sense. There's no God, there's no recognition of God, so marriage is sort of purely legal thing, and what law can make, it can undo.
Masonry considers the exercise of paternal authority to belong to parents only by virtue of a supposed concession of civil law, which can restrict or extend it at will. It recognizes as legitimate the rights that the state assumes over the education of children and the distribution of inheritances.
Yes, that we see that now, where parents cannot object to indoctrination and the most vile and wicked things that are done in schools, and no, it's we're seeing it before our eyes. Yeah.
Parents aren't even notified of potential gender changes to their children.
No, it's all the state reaching down into the family. The family is just a collection of individuals for the state, and the child is as much as an individual as the parent. So the state has absolute rights over everything, and of course the state is looking for good liberals to vote for them as they grow up. See, so that's why they're indoctrinating them that way.
In terms of education and the direction it gives it, Masonry is based on the principle of original perfection. According to Masonry, children are naturally inclined towards goodness and need only to follow their inspirations to be good and virtuous. This is refuted by the experience of all nurses and mothers, who are constantly observing that the tendency to evil is predominant in young children. In spite of that, Masonry still relies on this false dogma to reduce all education to mere instruction, to prohibit punishment, to dismiss religious education, to develop feelings of pride, and to stimulate ambition. In education, Masonry does not accept that science should be subordinate to dogma, that presumed and hypothetical truth should be subordinate to fixed and absolute truth. It does not accept that the latter should serve as a touchstone for verifying the former. Masonry considers it appropriate that education should be compulsory and neutral, meaning that the state should subject all souls to the influence of its educational system in order to Masonize them all. And if anyone protests against the absolute monopoly of education and wants to preserve a certain freedom that allows people to escape state education, Masonry thinks it is only fair that he who wants to make us of it should not only pay for it himself, but also be required to contribute to neutral education. And then we get now, Your Excellency, it's illegal to homeschool your children in some parts of Europe.
Yes, they will actually take your children away from you. No, it's brutal. And that's all Jean-Jacques Rousseau. You see, denial of original sin. We're essentially good, and we don't have any problems. We don't have tendencies to evil. And he wrote this in a work called Émile, and which I think is on the index. Practically everything.
It is on the index.
Yeah, Émile, and it was essentially let your kid run wild and do whatever he is inclined to do.
Right, like he knows anything about raising children.
Well, we won't go into that. He abandoned his children in Paris and went over and I think picked up with somebody in England, if I recall. And no, he was, as I said, a debauched idiot and nut. Yeah.
An unoriginal one too, His Excellency also noted. He's not even an original nut. He's someone who just copies ideas.
He copied John Locke all the time.
When the Church teaches its dogmas to those who are baptized and requires them to adhere to the faith, Masonry calls this despotic oppression and servitude of thought. But when the state imposes atheism, it considers this to be liberal.
Oh, yes. So, of course, yes. It's being neutral, and yes. No, it's these things are seen more in once Catholic Europe than here, but it's pretty bad here. It's again, homeschooling varies by state. Fortunately, generally in the United States, you can do it.
Yeah, I don't think it's illegal anywhere in America, Your Excellency. I feel like it would be headline news if it was.
It's regulated in some places more than others, but Canada is very, very strict, especially Quebec. And France, they'll take your kids away. Germany, they take your kids away. Could you imagine doing that?
Extraordinary.
The trauma of that for everybody. I mean, the kids too. I mean, they take it from their mothers and their fathers. I mean, people
People
are
have had to
like
move.
animals.
People have had to move country, Your Excellency.
Yes.
We know of traditional Catholics who've had to move out
Yes.
of the country because they knew they were facing this choice.
Yes.
Masonry recognizes the state's power to declare property rights null and void when they concern ecclesiastical property, the most sacred of all property. It recognizes the state's right to make laws on the transfer and use of private property, thereby steering minds and institutions towards state socialism.
Yeah, that's not so much true in this country. Not at all. But in France, yes, they regulate to whom you can leave your own property. It has to go through the state to see if they approve of. It's your own property.
Extraordinary.
When I heard that at a cone that they were blocking wills that were benefiting a cone. It's your own money. It's not the state's money, but it's that state socialism, and
See, that's where you're mistaken, Eric. So you think it's your money, but it isn't.
it is not. It's the state's money, and you're using it.
Masonry diverts man's attention and heart from the primary needs of the poor, those of his soul. It sees in him only the body, and among the works of mercy, it admits only those that have the body as their object. It wants the bread given to satisfy hunger, the clothing intended to cover nakedness, the visit made to the destitute, the disabled, the remedy offered to the sick, to have no other purpose than bodily relief. It does not want there to be, beyond this immediate end, another purpose, to edify the soul, to perfect it, to help it obtain the goods that are proper to it, truth, the grace of God, eternal happiness. And that is why, if it finds the secularization of hospitals, hospices, and orphanages to be bad, it is solely because it has observed through experience that secular care is not as good as religious care. It does not regret the absence of spiritual support, nor does it recognize it as beneficial. Masonry dries up the true source of charity by disregarding the true primary motive that should determine it, the love of God. It wants us to love man for man's sake. It calls this philanthropy and opposes it to divine charity. In order to obtain support for its philanthropic works, Masonry, ignorant or dismissive of higher motives, resorts to various means, all equally miserable. It tries to stimulate natural sensibility, but in fact, if not in words, selfishness answers that it is less unpleasant to see one's neighbor suffer than to impose sacrifices on oneself. It opens public subscriptions and uses human respect to encourage contributions through fear of ridicule and censure. It organizes charity events, public markets of sensuality, where people obtain pleasure for themselves in the name of the suffering of others.
It's Leo again. The purpose of the church is humanitarian aid. He's constantly talking about the poor, constantly, and that I think he said the other day that hope is to looking forward to a perfect planet or perfect.
I'm impressed you can keep all these horrible quotes in your mind, Your Excellency.
It's something like that.
I try to flush
in
it
other
out.
words, where humanitarianism is going to solve all of the problems of the world. That was the sense of it. Nothing supernatural.
Art is no more immune to the influence of Masonry than anything else. The art that it patronizes and extols is that which expresses and overstimulates the animalistic lust of man, to the detriment of art that expresses the feelings that ennoble the human soul and elevate its dignity. Masonry is, in the current time, absolutely dominant in art. Poetry and songs, painting and sculpture today seek to flatter the senses, to lead men to seek their joys in what debases and defiles them, instead of elevating them to the joys of the intellect and the soul. The influence of artistic and literary Masonry is tremendous. It reaches all classes of society, even the lowest, through soap operas, posters, official statues, and public entertainment, which are nothing more than a vast enterprise of general corruption.
Add the movies and all of the media today to all of that, and it's interesting. You can get something called Louvre HD, which is a great many of the paintings in the Louvre. and they organize it according to centuries. So they have the medieval art, and then early Renaissance, and then Renaissance, and you see about 7 or 8 categories. And you see the gradual in the Middle Ages, all of it is religious art, all of it, and the gradual decline of the human race into, by the time of the 19th century, it's all sorts of pornographic paintings. I mean, things that you can't look at. I mean, just filth. And then, of course, the 20th century you can't speak about. A lot of subjectivistic modern art, which is, the soul of the modern age is, think whatever you want and free thinking. And also a lot of dirt in that too. I mean, a lot of, Picasso had a lot of dirty things. But you just see the decay of civilization through the art. Little by little, how it becomes more and more worldly until it's sinking into the pits of filth.
As you said, you're actually heading straight down the tubes.
Straight down the tubes, filth and subjectivism. And until it's incomprehensible by abstract art. It's just repudiation of reason altogether.
Well, as the Emperor's New Clothes, you're actually, I don't know if you've ever seen these Rothko paintings, which are giant, just blocks of black, and then you're supposed to get some deep meaning out of that. Well, don't you get it? It's the Emperor's New Clothes with modern art.
Oh no,
it always needs an explanation. It has but that defeats the whole purpose of art. It should be self-evident.
It should be self-evident, yes, yes. But I would recommend that to people. Just to see it's called Louvre HD, and it comes right up on your screen. I mean, as far as the link and all, and you get into it, and they give you that list. And some pictures you can't look at, but you can see the decay of European Catholic culture into the modern world,
just in a sort of thumbnail form.
Yeah, just you see little pictures, and then you just see what we're living in, and that doesn't even show the abstract art. The totally, where somebody throws paint at a
or
at a canvas.
Duct tape a banana to the wall.
Yes, something like that.
And this is the last quote from today's episode. In order to bring these two classes of men together, to work towards our goal and to succeed, we had to find an explanation of Christianity that would bring the superstitious back to reason, and teach to the freest and wisest of us not to reject the thing itself because of its abuse. The secret was to be that of Masonry and lead us to our goal. To bring these two extremes together, we therefore say that Jesus did not establish a new religion, but simply wanted to restore natural religion to its rightful place. His intention was to teach us to govern ourselves and to restore freedom and equality among men without the violent means of revolution. All that was required was to quote various passages from Scripture and give explanations, true or false, it does not matter, as long as everyone found a meaning in the doctrine of Jesus that was in accordance with their own reasoning. Spartacus had gathered a great deal of information for this purpose. I added my own in the instruction for these 2 degrees.
Yeah, it sounds like Leo.
You said that a few times in today's episode, Your Excellency.
It's the modern world. I mean, yeah, sure.
As we continue on in this series, Your Excellency, I think Msgr Delassus just continues to develop these themes more deeply and in more detail. And as you've noted, it's almost as if he had a revelation. It's almost as if he knew exactly what was going to happen and is explaining it to us, even though he's talking specifically to the French about their time period.
Yeah, I think that's why it's a life-changing book, as I called it. It so alerts you to the deep roots of the problem that he is able to predict exactly what is happening today. And this is 125 years ago. I mean, there were still horses and carriages when he was saying this. And that you just see the whole picture when you read this book. That's why I would recommend it to anybody, And yes, it's dominated by what's happening in France, but you can abstract from that and see similar things that are happening really in the whole, what you might call Western world.
Well, we'll continue on with this life-changing book in our next episode. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for taking the time to work through the text with us and give your insights. It's always very helpful.
Thank you.